Hello. In this video, we're going to start working through and walking through the expectations for part 1 of Project 2 in EDU 525. So on the left, I am going to go into the project directions, and on the right, I have a sample student project that we'll use to kind of give you guidance on expectations of what we're looking for with the first part of Project 2. So if I go into the left and expand the Project 2 instructions and rubric and scroll down, I'm going to focus in on the directions and the what to submit and the supporting materials. So first I'll look at the supporting materials. The very first part is the Project 2 parameters template, and that should be part of the first couple pages of your project submission. So over on the right, I have the project that we're looking at as the example project that has been completed and filled out. The example we're looking at is a 6th grade social studies course. It does have examples of the objectives or part of the name and description before it goes into information on the project. So you'll want to do that first. But then after that, with the directions, if I go to part 1, it says that it is the evaluation. And so with the evaluation, you should have each of these items, which should be labeled clearly with subheadings that have bold text. So we start with an overview, and that's the completed project parameters, but it's also an introduction. So if I go below the template, the next thing you'll see in the example, student example that I'm sharing, is that there's a very brief, very short introduction, and it's titled Overview. You can clearly see that. Next, the paper goes into examples on views of education. And so if I read the directions, it basically says, based on this research that's provided in the Culturegram and other resources, I shared some in previous announcements, but it says that you're going to describe the research, what the research tells you about the cultural heritage of these families. You're going to do so by talking about common views about education. And so if I look over at the sample project on the right, it goes straight into a section titled Views on Education. And you can look at the different citations. There should be APA citations written throughout. This shouldn't be a bulleted list. It should be a professionally written paper that has in-text citations that are linked to the references. There are multiple citations you can use. You should not have the same citations for all 3 sections. So different pieces will use different parts. So it's more than one resource you're looking at. So you'll talk about what you learned about the views on education. There's some other examples in there that you can talk about. Then next you go into information on cultural norms related to communication preferences. So if I scroll through to the next section in the example, there's a new paragraph. It is labeled communication. It goes into some additional information, and different resources are used for this section. It's just some basic information. We're not looking for a full, detailed, all-out report about each of these items, but we do want to know and be able to tell that you have gone out and done some research to learn more about the education system, what things you have to focus on when you're talking about communication. And then the final part, the final bullet point for this first part, are common parent-child family dynamics. So you can label it family dynamics however you want, but again, it's another paragraph with some resources that talk about some information. And so those are the 3 main required sections. But then below those 3 pieces, there's a final bullet point that says identify additional information you will attempt to gain about cultural heritage of this group of students during the first few weeks of the course. And so this is outside. This is the other characteristics. And so you're looking for some other pieces of information about the Colombian culture that you find to be interesting as you conduct your research. So if I scroll down, this particular person chose to use music and dance and talked a little bit about some different things of music and dance and how they might play a part in the lesson or in the course, specifically related to the lesson plan that's being presented in the example project. There is also a good section, it's not required, but it does talk about relevance. It does say explain why each piece of information is important and how you will use that to tailor your instructions. So it may not be titled relevance, but you do need to explain that piece when you close out the rest of your part 1 for project 2. And so as I scroll down, once you get to the references, you'll want to make sure that all of your references align and link to the in-text citations that are used throughout. So you can see that in the example on the right, that each section is clearly labeled. There's about a paragraph, maybe some have a 2 paragraphs, well-written paragraph, 4 or 5 sentences for each, to basically describe each of the different required categories. And so that's what your part 1 for project 2 should look like.